buy groceries with it. But here was something, a gentleman in 2006, I think it was, or 5 or 6, there was a man who set about to prove that the 16th Amendment was never ratified properly. And that's our income tax. That's where everything is based on, your income tax, 16th Amendment. This gentleman traveled around to every state that was a state. I'm sorry?
Bill Benson, Red Beckman.
Yes, you're exactly right. Traveled to every state and found out that the states that voted to ratify the 16th Amendment never voted to ratify it. It was declared by acclamation by, what was the Secretary of State at that time?
Wilson.
No.
Wilson was president.
Wilson was president. The Secretary of State declared it. I've got it here somewhere. But on January the 10th, 2008, in the federal district court in Chicago, Bill Benson filed a lawsuit stating that the 16th Amendment had never been ratified. The federal district court in Chicago issued a permanent injunction against Mr. Benson on the grounds that by offering information demonstrating that the 16th Amendment was not ratified, he was promoting an abusive tax shelter.
Oh, boy.
Tax shelter?
Tax shelter.
Oh, shelter.
The court then refused to look at all of his documents, which proved that the states had never ratified it. They refused to look at all of his documents, and each set of documents had been signed off by the Secretary of State in each state that he took there, that said no document exists, that this was ever even voted on in a lot of states, that it was ever even brought up in a lot of states.
It's William Jennings Bryan. Sorry.
Yeah, he was involved in that, but Benson, then they said, here, they refused to look at all these documents that said the 16th Amendment was never ratified, and then they decided that they refused to look at the evidence, but said the facts necessary to prove your statements true are irrelevant.
Wow.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
That's their magic wand.
Mm-hmm. So the federal government said documented evidence from each state proving that this amendment was never passed is irrelevant.
And who filed the lawsuit?
Bill Benson.
Bill Benson.
He has a website called The Law That Never Was. Go there, you can check each state out for all of the things that are listed.
I know Red Beckman does a radio show every Thursday morning.
He was very much involved in that.
Yeah.
And then, later, someone decided, well, if that old 16th Amendment wasn't ratified, and our founders were just totally against senators being elected in a popular election. They were adamant that this was wrong, because it again took us from a republic to a national form of government. And there are, I don't have enough time, I will send you all of these for everybody that's on the list. I will send you all of these statements that were made in the Constitutional Convention and in the ratifying convention about senators being elected by the state legislators. Because the state legislators knew what was important in those states, or should, if we're doing our job as people who vote for them. So then they decided, let's go look at the 17th. And I believe, if you've read a lot of these things, I believe you probably have heard of Debbie Kidd. Debbie Kidd was very much involved in going around looking for the 17th Amendment to prove that it was ratified, found much the same things, and at the time she was doing this, she had gone to the National Archives and gone to some other places. They found out she was doing it, and this was the same time, and I can't remember his name right now, I'm racking my brain, One of the members of the Clinton administration went into the National Archive and stole the documents.
Sandy Berger.
Sandy Berger, thank you.
Yes.
Sandy Berger went into the National Archive and stole the documents that would have proved that Debbie Kidd and others had already seen that would prove the 17th Amendment was never ratified.
They went back and did the same thing on the 16th Amendment.
Yes,
They went back and said that a lot of those documents are gone.
yes. And Berger was fined, what, $5,000?
Yeah.
That is, and something and I think we really need to hang on to. Then I want to get into, I don't want to take too much of anybody's time, I know you need to speak. So I'm going to skip some of this, and I'm going to send it to you, so you can read it. And if you have any questions, please email me, as long as Obama's not in your first 10 weeks. Because he's irrelevant in my mind. We are the problem, not him. But one of the things I wanted to get into now is I believe that our answer to our problems lies at the local level. If you want to change America, do it in your backyard. Right now, because of electronic voting machines in the populated areas of this country, we don't have a hope of influencing a national election. Now, I'm going to tell you this, let me be upfront, it doesn't work. What I'm going to tell you doesn't work 100% of the time. Let me tell you about my failure first. 4 years ago, I cornered a candidate for a sheriff. And I said, what do you know about the Constitution? The first thing I asked him in a public forum was, do you know what your oath of office is? I asked all the candidates. We had 5 candidates for sheriff sitting there, not one of them knew what their oath of office was. That was the first alarming part. Colorado is rather unique. In the state of Colorado, a sheriff takes a very simple oath of office. I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and the Constitution of the state of Colorado. It's over. Your job is to defend 2 constitutions. It's very simple. So this guy who was a candidate for sheriff came to me and he said, obviously you know a whole lot more about the Constitution than I do. He said, would you help me? And I said, sure. And I worked with him, meeting with him 3 times a week, discussing pertinent things about the Bill of Rights. That's what he really needs to know, not the Constitution. He really needs to know the people's rights if you're going to be a sheriff. And I went through all of this for him. I secured a lot of people who supported him, who stood up for him, who gave him money, everything else. And I learned a very valuable lesson. I heard you folks talking about it. Getting someone who has been involved in the government for years and years and years and thinking you're going to convert them is a waste of time. It's not going to happen. He had been a City of Cortez police officer for almost 30 years. He had more allegiance to the thin blue line than he did to the Constitution. He has demonstrated that abundantly, and for that reason we have a plethora of candidates for the new sheriff, and I've already found me one. But that is something you really have to understand. Do not get someone who has been ingrained into government. Your best hope is to find, in my opinion, I sell it for what it's worth. Your best hope is to find people who are good, moral, ethical people and get them to run for office. Now, sheriff presents a problem because you're required to be a post-certified officer. Well, the candidate that I'm supporting, although he has 20 years of law enforcement experience in another state, is paying for his own certification. He said the people of my county should not have to pay for me to be post-certified. I will pay for it myself. But I wanted to tell you about my failure first. A few years ago, I realized that our district attorney was an incompetent idiot. And that's an understatement. He's the one that yelled at me about the supremacy clause. So I'm sitting in a coffee shop one morning and waiting on some friends to show up. And I look over to the left and I see this guy dressed nicely, sitting over there working on his computer. And I assumed right away he was a lawyer. And I said, "You're a lawyer, right?" And he said, "Yeah." So I introduced myself. And we talked a while, and I asked him, I said, "What's your thought about government?" He said, "We got way too much of it." I said, "Are you on prescription drugs?" And he said, "No." So I said, "Well, what do you think about, what's your thoughts on the 10th Amendment?" "Well, that's pretty clear." I said, "What's your thoughts on the 4th Amendment?" And by the time he finished telling me what his thoughts were on the 4th Amendment, I said, "Have you ever considered running for district attorney?" And he said, "The thought has crossed my mind." And I said, "Well, young man, let's get it going." He said, "You're serious?" And I said, "You better believe it." I said, "You've got a basic understanding of the Constitution. You're malleable. I can work with you. And I think we can put some people behind to help you to get you started." I started carrying him around the county, introducing him to people. Had to take him to Dolores County too, because he's district county of a neighboring county. And I took him up there. He decided he was going to run as a Republican. And so, guess what? The guy who was an incumbent was a Republican, and he was an incompetent idiot, and the Republican Party did everything they could to keep my guy from getting elected. They accused him of being a drug addict, and this is the Republican Party, guys, this is not the Democrats. The party he was running on accused him of being a drug addict. One of the state legislatures who was a Republican, who was a member of the state legislature, he's running again. He called people and told them his house was full of drugs. We had all of this going on. We struggled through. We got this guy elected by 19 votes.
Wow.
After 3 recounts, I think. Last recount, he gained a vote, so we went from 18 to 19. He got into office, and one of the first things I talked to him about when we started meeting and getting together was, "Do you understand the importance of a grand jury?" And he said, "Nope." And I said, "You need to. You need to understand the importance of a grand jury." And he said, "Okay, tell me why I need to support a grand jury." So I said, our founders intended for the people to be the last people to decide whether a law is constitutional or not. The people are put here for a reason. That's why don't ever try to get out of jury duty. People, we have a duty. If we want this thing to work, you better wish they would let you on the jury.
We do, but they won't select us.
Must have a name somewhere.
Well, since I started all this, I hadn't been asked either. So they claim they do it with a computer,
Yeah.
Yep.
but anyway,
That computer has too much information.
I said, let's
NSA whip.
I said, let's do a grand jury. I said, why wouldn't you want one? He said, well, there's never been one in Montezuma County. And I said, yeah, well, you know, there's never been a bank robbery till somebody thought of it. So let's.
That's not good logic.
But it's true. I'm not real fond of bankers either, so. But I don't advocate stealing what doesn't belong to you. But so he said, explain to me what you're talking about. And I said, well, you know, one of the things that will always happen when you're a district attorney is there are going to be people in the community who are going to say, you didn't prosecute so-and-so because of his connections. Or you prosecuted so-and-so because he wasn't in the good old boy network. I said, turn it over to a grand jury, buddy. All you really do, all we elect you to do is prosecute people. Let the people make the decision on whether the law's been broken or not. Let the people make the decision on whether the Constitution's been violated or not. I said the grand jury has the right to sit down and say, yes, this guy right here, he violated that law. That law is unconstitutional. Turn him loose. You've put it back in the hands of the people again. You've let the people make those decisions. They're the people who's affected by these laws. Let them make the decision. Let them pass Obamacare. First person that's charged with not doing it, bring him in and say, no, he's free. That law is unconstitutional. Say something about guns. You know, hey, well, you can't have that. Whoa. He was charged with having a gun. Oh, come on in here. Yeah, we look at this. Yeah, he did what he was done. He should have had 2 guns. He only had 1, but we're going to let him free anyway. It's real simple if you put it back in the hands of the people. But people, that requires people who understand this Constitution, not that one.
Exactly.
Because if you see people on a grand jury and it's picked with that darn computer, and they believe this Constitution is right, we've accomplished nothing. I think it's Hosea 4:3 says, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. If that's not true in this country today, we're way off base. So I worked with him, we got him elected. He walked in, he was in office 14 days. He went through the sheriff's indictments and he dismissed 40 cases.
Wow. Good job.
Sat down with his people, went through the cases that were pending and said, boom, those cases, you violated the rights of somebody when you arrested them.
Good job.
Now, if you're going to make a good case, make me a good case, bring it in here, I'll prosecute it. You go out there, you violate people's rights to put them in jail, I'm going to turn them loose. And he's done that repeatedly for the last year.
Wow.
And then he heard from a little bird that the undersheriff was crooked. And so he said, grand jury, come on in. We indicted an undersheriff for 17 counts of stealing from the public. Grand jury. Those don't belong to me, they belong to Will. You have to have somebody with the courage to do this.
Oh, pass them on.
I'll tell him. You have to have someone. One of the first things he did when he got into office, he took everybody in his office and sent them to my concealed carry class. So I got some county money. But, so see, it was a quid pro quo. I got him in office. He has been so good on this. But we've got, this grand jury said, we don't think we got as, the last grand jury for 2013 said, we don't think we got as deep into the sheriff's department as we want to go. Well, his time ran out. So Will applied for a new grand jury. It has to be done on an annual basis, according to Colorado Constitution. He applied for a new grand jury, and our chief judge just denied him the right to have a grand jury.
What? How could he do that?
Well, I don't want to get too into it, but Will and I sat and worked on an appeal of this decision for about 3 hours. We want to do it on constitutional grounds. We want this to happen. So then we've got a good DA. We've got a guy that's in there, he's working to protect the rights of the people. He will dismiss a case in a heartbeat if there's any question of impropriety. As a matter of fact, he sent a letter to the sheriff and said, you've got a deputy that if he's ever listed on any case that I ever do, it will be dismissed. He said he's perjured himself 7 times in the courtroom, I can prove it. And most of these were drug cases where he had fabricated evidence to get a search warrant, and they had found it out, and then they had questioned him about it. This deputy, the last time he was questioned by a defense attorney, took the 5th. So Will said, you can keep him if you want to, buddy. I will not prosecute any case he's on. Sheriff got real mad. Because believe me, there are people in law enforcement who think they have the right to violate your rights to make an arrest.
You bet there are.
They've been